groovy cowgirls. Welcome to the Jazz Ranch. I'm your altar-dominant funky cowboy. You know, we have retired cowboys here. They call me retarded. You know what I call them? Deranged. You know, you get it? Deranged. Now, sorry for the corny jokes, but anyway, the Cage has a serious lesson for you this evening about Bill Evans' transitions. Now, you know, I don't know what it is. He's a transition. What is he? Transition from, like, you know, one stage of his life to another? No. Anyway, he'll explain it to you. But in the meantime, I'm going to give you my impression of Hank Williams. So here we go with my impression of Hank Williams. Here we go. Hello friends, welcome to the Jazz Ranch. And I'm sorry about the altar-dominant ego man, funky cowboy. He's always cutting in on my introductions. But anyway, I have something for you this evening based on Bill Evans' transitions. In other words, what he plays between the head of the song and his solo, which are amazing transitions. And I'm going to be showing you those tonight. And I'm going to be using the song Easy to Love. I'm going to play the song for you and show you the transition and talk about it later on. So here we go with a great song by Cole Porter called Easy to Love. Here we go. Okay, welcome to the Jazz Ranch studio. This is where I talk about what I played and explain it. Now, in this case, I'm not going to be talking about the song Easy to Love. I'm going to be talking about the transition between the melody or the head of the song and the improvised solo. Now, in most cases, that transition is 2 bars. I made it 4 bars just to make my point. And I'm using a concept that Bill Evans uses quite often in his transitions between the head and the solo. And I learned this by listening to his version of Spring Is Here, which I made a recording of, and you can go to that one. I'm going to give you that example later on. But I used this one, a 4-bar transition on Easy to Love. Now, it's very typical of Bill Evans to use this, so I call it iconic. It's something that is specific to him. He uses it quite often. You will recognize it in his playing, and it's very exclusive to him. I haven't heard other players use it quite the way he does, and so it's extremely fascinating to me, and I want to show it to you. And it's a very simple thing, but it's also complex. Now, what it is generally the transition is built on some kind of a progression, and often he uses just one chord, in other words, underlying chord, which is a pedal tone in the bass. And if we're in the key of C, it's going to be the G7 chord. And then he builds this transition out of that chord, and he builds it on the scale of what I call the altered dominant. It's the same as a diminished scale, but it's starting with a half step instead of a whole step. So that would be starting on G and going half step, whole step, like this. So that's built on the G7, and it gives you the flat 9, the sharp 9, and the sharp 11, and the 13, and so on. So you have all those interesting alterations or intervals in that scale. Now, what he does is he does a chord. So he's doing a chordal interpretation of that scale built on the first inversion. So that puts the melody on the top now, and now he plays that scale using those chords. These type of chords. You see, like that, using that scale. So that's what I did. I did that in the right hand, but then in the left hand what I did was, instead of putting the root on there, like the G root against and the A flat root, I raised the root a half step, and that's the sound of the chord. So it's that sound. Very dissonant sounding, but what is that chord? It's a great sounding chord, and it has great tension, so it puts tension in that transition that gives it a very defined essence to it. Like it's very different sounding, and you're in a state of, and then the solo comes in and things move forward, but you're in a sort of a state of flux right there. You're not moving. But just through this progression of it, which is very dissonant. And like I say, what is that chord? Let's look at it. Well, it's a diminished chord, right? That'd be a major. That's a diminished triad, but what, with a major 7 on top? That gives it the dissonance, that half step dissonance, a major 7. And now we make that parallel, we have this, you know. Play them in chromatic movement and you get the hang of it better maybe, but it's not an easy thing to play. It's complex, and he can play it melodically, and he does it with virtuosity. He can play any melody he wants with that sound, and that tension is amazing when you hear it, you know, and wow, and then it resolves into the solo, and then it moves forward, you see. So it's a fascinating thing, and I'm going to give you the example that he uses in Spring Is Here next. Okay, now explaining what Bill Evans played on Spring Is Here for the transition. Now, this is extremely clever, and it's complex because he's actually playing on 2 scales. He's this tune is in A flat major, and it starts on an A flat diminished chord. To diminish. So using a substitute chord, he's using a dominant chord, which is an E7 sharp 9. It's the version of the diminished, but it's a dominant. It's like a E7 with a sharp 9, which has the same notes in it as the A flat diminished. Same scale. So now he's using this lick. Right there, so now he switches to the E flat dominant chord there for the next part of it, and it goes like this, right? That's built on the E flat now, dominant chord, and then back to the E7 chord. So he has 2 underlining chords rather than just the one dominant chord, the E flat dominant. He has the E7 sharp 9 and then the E flat 7 sharp 9 going on there. So I won't talk about that anymore. I'll just have you look at the sheet that you can download and study it and listen to what he plays and have some enlightenment, hopefully, on what he's doing, and incorporate it into your playing or your concepts, or at least be fascinated and interested and having some inside information on what Bill Evans is doing in those mysterious chords that he's playing, which mystified me for many years, and now I kind of understand them. Now that I understand them, I respect him even more than I did before that, before I understood them. I understand how complex his mind is, what he hears, what he's capable of hearing, what he's capable of playing, which is just astounding. So now, I'm going to leave you with a little message. This is from the jazz cruise that we went on recently, and I'll leave you with this positive message. Here we go.